So please welcome Sarah Grace to the show. Welcome, Sarah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, gosh, I have been listening to your book, Journey into Grace. And, I was thinking about this today because you've really you're in my mind and, your voice because of Audible. I prepare for these interviews and I realize if I didn't have the podcast, I would have been interested and looked, but I love to go so deep because I have you with me. And oh my gosh, your life is just just to be vulnerable in a book. And I was trying to think, gosh, if I wrote a book, my girls would go, "You did that, mom?" Right? But
Yeah.
it's just what a freeing feeling and just what does it feel like even to have a book that you've been so um, vulnerable? Does it kind of make you feel like, wow, well, everyone knows everything now?
Uh, it's definitely mixed. In writing the book, I liken it to giving birth to a porcupine because my intuition kept having me it was really just like put everything in. And at one point, Ash, I was banging my head on the table next to my computer, like, I don't want to put that in there. But my intuition was just like, everything, girl, like everything. And I'm so grateful that I did because that's what people resonate with is that sense of vulnerability because all of us have stuff, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's easy to look at an author or people on TV or people like just externally, even on social media, is like, oh, they have everything together when the actuality is we're all human.
Right,
And so I just
exactly.
kind of put all my humanity in there. And that's really the common thread. And that's been the elixir that I believe is Journey into Grace's success. Yeah.
I 100% agree because I was just so excited every morning to get up to listen to you to continue through the story. And it was that. That is the elixir. Okay. So now everyone needs to know you because your story, your gifts, and the the way that this is what I came across, what I came up with thinking of your story. If you were going to write, you're going to look up above your life and see the points. You see yourself at 7, see yourself at 17, 19, see all these little points along the line and now be where you are now. Like, oh, that's why all that had to happen, you know?
Exactly. It's
But
like
talk about, yes.
in order is really what it's been. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I look back, I'm like, oh, it totally makes sense for
Yeah, but
who I am now and what I do now.
you listened to your intuition. You followed it. And so many people ignore that. And that's what I feel like uncovers your magic when you listen to your intuition and you just keep picking up the breadcrumbs. And I talk about that a lot. But it's always like, gosh, that's what I loved about it was, oh, why does that keep telling me to do that? I guess I'm going to do it. It's like, that's what I loved. That was the magic that I felt about who you were. Like she just kept moving forward and taking that inspired action and going. Okay, so let's now unwrap your story and bring people to why I feel like you're like this magical human being soul, and how you started. You can go back to 7 if you want. Like I'm trying to think where you
Yeah.
want to
So,
go.
I was raised in a tiny town in South Dakota in the middle of nowhere pre-internet. So there was no outside connection whatsoever. And I was just a normal kid, as growing up back then. But one day when I was 7, I woke up and the first telltale of my psychic abilities was clairvoyance. I started seeing auras and colors around people. And then over the next couple of weeks, it kept increasing in terms of I could feel how people were feeling. I knew if they were lying. And then it continued to progress to where I could see disease in people's bodies and ultimately to seeing spirits, dead people. And there's a lot of tribal culture, in South Dakota. I grew up on Standing Rock. And so here I am, a kid, middle of nowhere, just trying to be normal, trying to fit in. not understanding like, why is this? And I just thought it was going to go away. Like I hoped it would go away. It was very overstimulating, but it didn't go away. And so ultimately, I finally decided to ask a family member about it. And unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned. I got the hellfire and brimstone bit, like, don't talk about this. We'll send you to the loony bin.
Mhm.
And that began kind of an odyssey, a personal odyssey of toxic shame and non-acceptance of self and of my abilities. I didn't understand why I was like this. I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to see stuff or hear stuff or know stuff. And it really began the odyssey that then, continued on to where I am now.
Okay, so let's go to, I mean, first of all, the story of your mother. And, I know you're a mother of two children and same as me. And when I'm listening to that, she was placed, you chose her
Yeah.
to abuse you. I mean, to an extreme. I mean, if people are listening and you've got to read this book, but to at the most extreme and how to be a mother and to know that you chose her to do that is just so apparent in your journey, right?
Oh, totally. So in addition to all of the high sense perception, it was a very, volatile and violent home and upbringing. And I was dealing with a very mentally ill and mentally unstable mother who there was a lot of physical and psychological assaults daily. And my actual physical life was, and this is not any sort of overestimation or overassumption, it was actually in jeopardy daily for the first 16 years of my life, which primed me to become like a paramedic in the 911 system. I understand because I grew up in such extreme chaos and violence and volatility and kind of on the edge of death, if you will, that the 911 system ultimately became just, it was like a duck to water for me in that. So yeah, I did pre-incarnation choose my mother, though I didn't understand that until much later in life after I started my own healing process and journey. I was really jacked up from it for a long time.
Oh man, were you ever? Like, so, but when you go through, so I'm thinking, I have a 18-year-old and I know your mom died when you were 17. And so I'm picturing that and, thinking of what you were going through. And even though you had that relationship with her, you were still, I mean, it was a loss. It was your mother. And then you get into drugs
Mhm.
and to cope, and
Mhm.
then you overdose on pills, and you're now can you go into that and how you had your near-death experience?
Yeah, so here I was again, awash in all this sensory information that I didn't have context for, trying to fight for my life all the time. And then my mom abruptly was diagnosed with cancer, and diagnosis to death was 6 months. So, like you're saying, even though she was kind of my nemesis, it was still my mom, and I always wanted that love. And then once she died, and I never got that closure, I never got that love, I just bottomed out. So I started to go off the rails with drugs and alcohol and smoking and just all kinds of crazy behavior because I was searching for a sense of control, safety, and just to numb it out. And so in one of my adventures, if you will, I had bottomed out and I was like, I'm so over this. I don't want to do that anymore. So like I overdosed and I went into a unity consciousness experience. And it was actually so beautiful because the energy was very like honey-like, and I understood everything simultaneously, and it all made perfect sense. And for the first time, maybe ever, I finally felt tranquility and serenity and calm. And then I heard a female voice, which now I understand is either my higher self or, a guide. But she was very much more eloquent than I'm about to be, but she was pretty much like, yeah, we get it's been hard, but you're
Mhm.
done. And I'm floating there like expanded and ready to just like shed the body and be done with the incarnation. And she's like, if you choose to stay, you're actually going to help a lot of people understand this world, meaning the energetics. And so obviously I chose to stay. I kind of tantrumed and floated out there for a little longer, but then I chose to stay. And the funny thing is when we're in a heightened state of consciousness where everything makes sense and everything is simultaneously, if you've ever had one of those spiritual experiences or transcendental experiences or psychedelic experiences where we go beyond the egoic mind and into that unity consciousness, we just remember, right? Like, oh, this feels so good. And so I just assumed that coming back into human form, that, I would just kind of know exactly what to do. But that wasn't it. I kind of came back into the body, and then I was left with myself. And I was a hot mess at the time. I had a number of addictions. I needed to really face some behaviors. I needed to face my shame around being the way that I am, energetically sensitive. I needed to deal with all of my anger and my hatred for my upbringing and my family. And there was a lot of pulling myself up by my bootstraps that needed to happen. So that happened. And then ultimately my intuition took me out of out of the Midwest. And I made it eventually out to California and got into the 911 system. And that's where everything began.
But before you got into the 911, because that seems like, why would she do that? You kept having, if the sirens drove by, you would have that one voice say, you need to do that. And you're like, do that? Why would I do that? I mean, you're little 5'1"
I'm
little.
just I'm so small. I walk around fully upright in the back of an ambulance. It's so funny. Yes. So every time an ambulance would go by in my daily life, I would get this knowing, like, that you should do that. But at the time I was doing modeling and I was kind of like living in Florida. I was trying to forget who I had been in the Midwest. And I was in my early 20s. I was trying to reinvent myself. It was kind of this, I was doing some casting for Hollywood movies and I was in that world, but it just was very superficial. So anytime the ambulance would go by, my intuition would kind of lead me into that, but I was scared of it because I was like, man, I could kill people. What are you talking about? I don't know how to be a paramedic, And it wasn't until a few more kind of bottom outs. Like I've had a lot of those, not full rock bottom, but just a lot of opportunity for myself to really reflect and be like, well, crap, this isn't working, a number of times in my life, and then make changes accordingly. So I got out of the modeling and the Hollywood stuff and listened to my intuition and ultimately went for 911.
Ah, so you're in Inglewood, you're in like this major, like
Girl, I was in
high
yeah, I was
Compton.
Central.
Yeah, Compton. Yeah. So you go to the UCLA, get your thing, get your EMT
My EMT license, yeah.
license and start working and just explain, like, so then when we get into that part of your life and I'm understanding, what you do now, like why you were led to do that, why your higher self or angel was telling you that's what and you did it. And here you are, you had to borrow money from a friend to take the class. I mean, it's like, I just listened, I just like, I'm in with you and I'm like, gosh, and I'm in that classroom with all those young boys, and but so now we're into this EMT job. And I feel like right now you've like figured out how, like, you still kind of smoke, you've gotten rid of the drug thing and you're getting your life together, you have an income, and now everything's starting to like your gifts are coming to life.
Yes, exactly. And it's so funny that you say, because, for anybody listening with intuition, the invitation for each of us is to obviously listen to our own inner guidance, or that quiet whisper, that knowing. And I really do believe that we're all kind of divinely led to wherever we're meant to go. It's just whether or not we'll, how fully we'll trust it and whether or not we'll take action. And so I like to just be real about the fact that it's like, I was just kind of like slopping my way through trying to figure stuff out. You know what I'm saying? I've never really had anybody like a lot of extra outside help. There was a lot of me pulling myself up by my bootstraps, and that became very important, right? Because for me to continue to rally and be like, all right, this is a lot, but what am I going to do about it? That was essentially the thing that changed everything for me after the overdose, after my mom died, after I finally decided to get clean, kick all my addictions and get my behavior straight. I was still facing and left with the high sense perception. I was still navigating all of this stimulus all the time. And I felt really victimized by it for a long time. I still didn't want anything to do with it. And ultimately, the game changer, and this is very important pretty much for everyone, because this was the crux of everything that shifted it for me, was like, okay, this is what it is. This is how it is. What am I going to do about it? Right?
Mm.
I am like this. I cannot turn this high sense perception off. I see colors, I see tracers, I hear voices, I see spirits. It's like full neon high technicolor all the time, 24/7. What am I going to do about it? Right. And it was the same circumstance with the addiction and the crappy family upbringing. It's like I could have been justified in blaming my background and my upbringing and just going down as an addict. I mean, that's so common, and people would, I could probably understand why. But within myself, I was like, no, what am I going to do about it? And I decided to get clean, to change behaviors, to move to a different region of the country, to completely start fresh in a brand new field. And you cannot get further away from like South Dakota or from like pinup modeling stuff than first responders and South Central
Right.
Los Angeles, you know? And so
Totally.
willing to take myself into a new environment and put myself into something because my intuition was kind of, you know, leaning me in that direction. It was pretty ballsy, and it's scary, and it's not easy, you guys, but it is so worth it. Because all of a sudden I'm in this very alpha testosterone masculine field, which truly I thrive in, but it took a little getting used to. And this is very potent. This is literal life or death. This is literal chaos. This is literal like act and decide and, you know, maneuver in the moment. And after the initial kind of learning the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of how calls are run, oh girl, I just took to it like a duck to water. And it just, what happened is because I finally felt like I belonged somewhere, and the chaos and the symphony of death and destruction and chaos and car accidents and gunshot wounds and gangbang, all of the stuff in my internal state, it just felt so normal because of what I had come through.
Right.
And so in that, my psychic abilities began to expand, and they started working through me on these calls. It was nothing. I was still closeted. I was like, God, I finally fit in somewhere. I don't want to be the weird girl who sees dead people, man. Like I'm hanging out with SWAT dudes and stuff, you know? Can I just like be normal? But what happened was we would go on all of these different death calls, and I would know what was going to happen on the call 2 or 3 paces ahead of what did. My experience was very matrix-like. So everything would slow down and become silent. Everything would crystalline. So I could see like fractals. I could see souls leaving the body. I could watch the chakras release. I could watch the souls exiting as we're doing CPR. I'd see their dead loved ones come in on scene to greet the people who were dying, or I could see angels coming in to greet the people who had just been shot or burned or stabbed or whatever. And it became this like really high def, high resonance, multi-sensory experience in the 911 system. But it was incredible because it was real, like really applicable. I was able to finally take these skills and abilities that I wanted nothing to do with, and I was highly closeted over for 25 years. And then I started, all of a sudden, they were helping. And that really began the process of changing my mind and my viewpoint on psychic ability. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So when when you're talking and I'm thinking of all these stories, I want you to explain, because you didn't tell anybody for a while that you had that, but once they knew and the siren went on, they're like, oh, and Sarah's coming on. They said, we're in trouble. They've
Yeah. Everybody loved working with me because I was the paramedic I got all the worst calls. And as medics, we like that we're drawn to that, right? And so I was always there for death, almost every shift. And we would always be kind of in the middle of the big, whatever was going down in the county. But my coworkers, initially, I didn't say anything, but they could feel it. Because they could feel, I mean, this is just energy. Psychic ability is, all we're talking about is energetics and quantum physics and subtle fields, and having access or awareness to, you know, the subtle fields that are around all of us. That's all it is. You know, there's nothing to fear in that. I just didn't know it at the time. but they could feel, because all I was doing was expanding into a higher state just so that I could run the currents through my system. And people can feel that. So they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know," because I didn't at the time.
Will you explain the difference between like a natural death, an old, like the hospice version versus someone that got murdered or car accident, and how you see the difference in the energy?
For sure. So first, you guys, very important to understand, there is nothing to fear in death. Death is as natural as birth, and it's 100% guaranteed for all of us. So really, the biggest takeaway is, how are you going to live, right? Like, what are you going to do today? What, are you living the life you want? Are you eating the food, taking the vacations, burning the nice candles, using the nice utensils? Like, do it now,
Right.
right? That's my big message. But in terms of death, I started, because I've seen hundreds and hundreds, I started to notice differences between traumatic death and the medical death, as you're referring. So in a medical death, we'll say it's a hospice, end stage cancer, or end stage disease process. Usually the person is in like a bed, and they'll have a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, sometimes longer, but their auric field begins to expand. And in the auric field expanding, they call it the quote veil thins. And we've all heard of near-death experience story, cases, and we've all heard of like people that were dying or on their deathbed, and they start talking to the loved ones that have already transitioned.
Mhm.
Super common, like we hear about this all the time. And they actually are, because they can actually see them. And the reason that they can is because the auric field begins to expand and thin out, which diminishes or decreases the veil. Now, what is the veil? It's the five senses that are holding the container of the individual life experience, right? So ego, and then sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, gravity, duality. Welcome to the human paradigm. So this is expanding out, and then they're able to communicate. In the moments of death, the heart will stop. They'll go into agonal respirations, which is like guppy breathing. And then usually what I would notice, it looked like ribbons unfurling, and it would go from the base of the spine up the vertebral column and then out the crown of the head. That was their consciousness leaving their body. And it was so cool to see, because sometimes it was like really fast and sometimes it was slower, but it was always in the exact same, like orchestrated. So I knew that this was like divine. There's something bigger running this, right?
Mhm.
Any of us. And then I would watch them kind of shoot out the top of their head to their soul, to their deceased loved ones, who are usually up in the corner. Like maybe there's pets or loved ones, or if they were devoutly religious, there may be a religious deity or some sort of archetype waiting. And I would watch a little happy reunion over there in the corner before they would disappear. And so that was kind of the classic medical death that I saw, and beautiful, really beautiful to witness. Trauma death, which again is why I'm like, you guys just live your lives, because oh, I can't tell you how many calls I ran on people that got up and, they ate their Cheerios and they got their coffee and they got in their car and they were driving and they just got T-boned, and that was it.
Mm.
They had no idea that it was their last morning. And all of us think we have time. None of us think that's going to happen to us, right? But let me tell you, as somebody who was in the 911 system for 15 years, it does every day. And so in that experience, it's confusing to the person who died. And so it's like, just think of it, you're driving and then you get hit and you're in your body, and then boom, you're out of your body. And it's that fast. So it could be a shooting, it could be an accident, it could be whatever. And the soul would usually be standing next to the body, and the soul would look just like the body except translucent, so I could see through it. And they'd be looking around like, the heck? What's going on? And I would walk up and they could tell that I could see them. And
Hmm.
I think it's like somehow there's some sort of, it's almost like a lighthouse or some sort of tell for spirits to be able to tell who's a medium or who's a channel. And I don't know the exact energetic infrastructure of that, but they could always just tell. And I could see them and I'd be like, hey, what's up? Initially, so ultimately I developed a protocol because I saw this so often, and I would just be like, okay, you were just in a car accident. you're dead. We're going to pull your body out of the car. We're going to start CPR. So I'm telepathically
Mm.
rapid fire communicating to the soul so that they could kind of get a sense of understanding as we're pulling on the actual, working on the actual physical body, doing what we needed to do. So I'm working on multiple levels, the physical and the energetic. But in those, 9 times out of 10 on any type of trauma call, there would be an angel, some sort of celestial. And a celestial to me is just a consciousness. It's not something that I saw flutter down with like wings as much as just kind of a light being, and usually very large, probably 8 to 10 feet tall, sometimes bigger, androgynous, beautiful, but it wasn't about like any sort of human aspect of it. It was just a frequency of just love, gentle. And when that frequency, when that celestial or that angel came onto the scene, here we are, middle of chaos, pulling bodies out of cars or like bodies out of rubble or whatever we're doing. And all of a sudden it would just be blanketed with silence. And it would be the most serene, beautiful, yummy energy ever. And I would watch the soul who had just died. They would stop looking at their body or stop trying to climb back in their body, and they would turn and look at the angel, and then they would ever so slowly come together and merge with the angel and then disappear. And so I witnessed that over and over and over. And my interpretation was that the angel frequency helped the soul assimilate and process the death and crossing process so that
Mhm.
they weren't so like traumatized and shocked. You know what I'm saying? Because
Right,
it's the medical person, the medical death had time. Okay, I'm
right,
dying. I need, do what I need to do. But in a trauma, it's so like shocking. So I think that in that whole organized, whatever that divine thing that is driving the whole thing, I really think that that's part of it to just make it not so scary for.
right. Talk about the time you listened to your intuition because that's who you are, and you went to where there was that fire, and you went and you took a crystal and you walked in and it was in a trailer park.
Yeah, girl, that was paradise. And that was that whole city that got torched in Northern California. And California, we know it burns all the time. And, there's been so many people that have lost so much. But I was called, we had a huge fire in Northern California in 2018, and I was called to go up as a chaplain. By this time, I had completed as a paramedic, but was doing law enforcement chaplaincy work during COVID, which was like even more hardcore and intense.
Oh,
But
wow.
I got kind of intuitively led to go up to this place because there was 85 people incinerated in an hour and a half. The fire blew through at 6:30 in the morning at 80 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour, whatever it was. But they had no chance. And intuitively, I was led. My guides just had me, they just kind of instructed. And in my instruction, I'll either hear audible. Usually, though, it's just a knowing. Like I just knew I needed to take up a crystal, specifically a quartz crystal. And I was led to go to the center of like where the epicenter of where this had happened the morning after it happened. And it was so heavy. I mean, I'm used to death, but that much death that fast was an indescribable feeling.
Mm.
And being led into the densest area, I just kind of listened as my guides kind of pulled me in like a sonar. And I placed the crystal. Now, as I was walking in, it was a very dense trailer park where there was a lot of people that didn't have mobility, so they got stuck there and they all died. And when I came on scene using my clairvoyant vision, I could see probably 18 to 20 souls just floating and swaying in like this smoking ash. It was like one of the most eerie things I've still to this day ever seen.
Mm.
Because that was really my only big MCI of like soul crossing. Usually it's a one-on-one or maybe
Right.
two-on-one deal. I never dealt with 18 or 20 souls at once who were all like, what the hell just happened? Where are we? How come, they were so confused. And so once I intuitively placed the crystal down, it's almost like, again, almost like a lighthouse, for lack of a better way of saying it, since to me, everything is just vibration. Okay. And as soon as I placed it down, it's like this light went up out of the crystal. And my understanding was it was doing kind of the same thing as the angels do on the
Mhm.
calls, where it's like they started to kind of float towards the light. And I understood that that was my karmic contribution to that particular scene. And once I had done that, then I was complete with my experience there. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I was in there with you when you were describing it. And I just could not imagine that, just even being in that. It reminded me of Lahaina, like what that would have been like in Hawaii, a few
yeah,
months ago.
that's the only thing bigger than paradise just happened there in Maui. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was just as fast and hot. So it just happened again. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next story, it's just like me, like wanting just to read your book, read it, because it's just the touching thing about that little baby that had the SIDS death, and that you always say that's like the turning point or the moment that you
I
turning
decided
point.
at the point I decided to get educated because again, due to the toxic shame, due to being 7 and set, being told you're going to be sent to a loony bin if you talk about this, that really stuck with me for a long time. And so I was heavily closeted around my psychic abilities. I wanted nothing to do with it. And granted, it started happening on the 911 calls, and over the years, I had kind of softened and was like, all right, well, let me just figure out how to like navigate this. But I had a 3-week-old near SIDS call, and the firefighter comes running out. I'll never forget his eyes. They were like saucers. And his hands, like hot potatoes, me this dead kid who's no bigger than a Cabbage Patch doll. And I don't care who you are. I'm like super senior, seasoned paramedic by this stage, but I'm still a human. So I'm holding this dead kid in my hand. It's just this tiny little thing. And I just froze for a second. And I felt spirit knock me out of the way. And Sarah, was above myself, looking down, watching myself run the call. And so we got the baby to the hospital, and the baby made it. We did everything that we needed to do. And on the way, I actually knew that the baby wasn't going to die because he was still very corded to the body, and there was little spirit beings around it that were kind of just giving me the sense of reassurance that I didn't usually have when people were not going to come back. So we got baby to the hospital, and baby made it. But that was the thing where I was like, okay, like you can come through my hands, you can come over the back of me, you can tell me what's going to happen, but you cannot knock me out of my own body. Like I am
Right.
not cool with that. And I didn't understand it. And I was like, I have to get educated. Like, what is this? Why am I like this? Like everything I was ever told is not true. Like I'm helping people with this. So what is this? And that began my own personal odyssey of doing my own trauma healing, shadow work, and integration. And then I became educated. I started with meditation and Reiki, and then I went into shamanism and medical intuition, mediumship, all different types, branches. But now I specialize in psychic surgery. And so it really became this important pivot point for where I was finally like, okay, I have to face what I had been unwilling to face before. I had to really stand squarely and be like, again, I am like this. What am I going to do with it? Let me get educated. And I had to face my own judgment of the psychic community. And I don't really resonate with woo. I'm super grounded, and I like things to be practical and tangible and make sense. And so I was real adverse initially, and I had to tackle my own judgment, and I had to harness all of that, and I had to become curious. And that began, I'm going on 15, 20 solid years now of integration and education. So
Yeah. You know that story where I think he was in a coma, but I was curious about that and it's interesting about suicide. And you were saying suicide's up 400%. Like
in young females, yeah, during
yes.
COVID, like oh gosh, it's like 11 to 14. Yeah, females, it was up 400%, but suicide's just jacked like super high. And it's not just since COVID, it's been since before, but even more so, we're seeing the fentanyl. So it's like we got the suicides and then we got the fentanyl. It's just,
And
yeah.
but isn't that a different experience? Well, what's that room that you talk about where you went there, you went there in your mind and you saw them all waiting. And there
Mhm.
was that one boy that was said, tell my mom, like
He was,
remember?
I think, right? Was he one of the suicides?
Well, I
Well,
think he was in a coma or he had gotten on it.
yeah, he was in a car accident a long time ago or something, and he was kind of in an in-between space, and it's almost like a hypnagogic, which is between lucid and sleep. And in terms of like the practical, like why and what is that, it's going to be a different vibrational resonance where the consciousness goes for whatever reason. Now, it's like an altered mental state. Okay, so here we are talking, and then if one of us took a substance, we would just go to a different state. It's the same thing, except there's a disassociation, almost total disassociation, except for in this guy, he was still alive. He was in a coma, so obviously he was still connected to the body. In suicide, sometimes I would see kind of a similar room. It looked like a room. And I was like, what are you guys doing here? They're all just waiting. Right. And I was like, well, this doesn't look super fun. Like, what's up with this? But it was really almost like some sort of curriculum that soul, that person, they were learning something or doing something or integrating something or healing something on the consciousness level. And in that guy's case, like he wanted me to relay messages back to his mom. He got so excited, just like the autistic kids get so excited. You can see me in here. Oh my God. Like,
Oh,
it's so crazy. And to me, again, because clairvoyance and these types of psychic abilities, all it does is it's able to perforate through the typical confines of the five senses. And so I'm able to just kind of see these different lenses and where these people's consciousnesses reside, right? It's not like super fantastical. It's just energy. It's just, again, quantum. And so, but in terms of like, why does it present like that and what exactly are they doing? I honestly don't know, because I think it's an individualized curriculum and there's something about healing or integrating. A lot of the suicides go to kind of a holding tank where they're like with some guides and they're processing through their decision, and a lot of them regret it. Not all of them. Some of them are like, thank God, screw that crap. But a lot of them regret it. So I think it's kind of an assimilation, kind of a like, let's do a life review, let's check this out, and then before they transition into the next level.
how do you look at, so now understanding death so much from, and you understanding it so deeply, do you see like a fractal of our soul is in this body? And so when you see that, say the suicide, a fractal of his soul is in that body that decided to commit suicide. Where's the other fractals? And is it all happening? I know it's all happening at one time, but how do you describe that? Like I know am I in this a little part of my body, but my higher self is in this other quantum field and you
So that's such a great question. As far as I understand, there's trillions of dimensions all happening now simultaneous. So it's not ever past life, you guys. It's adorable when people say that, because it's all right now, which doesn't make sense to our mind, because our mind likes it to be linear. And we like to put stuff in boxes like, oh, I want this to make sense so that I can understand it, so that I can feel safe, right? It all comes back to feeling safe. Like, I gotta
right.
understand. But when we go into quantum, when we go into high sense perception, when we go into expanded awareness, it doesn't make sense. And so we are currently living thousands of parallel lives. And yes, we have one fragment that's here in this little human. This is just the, you know, dualistic paradigm that we're in. And it's like an oversoul. And there's the oversoul, it looks like a nerve or a brain cell. So it's got the axon and the dendrite. It's got this little like a circle with like a little squiggle. But it's like a holding tank for the data of all of those lives. So this is where we start to kind of get way more expanded. So your life, Ashley, or my life here is just one tiny little thread that's coming, and then you have thousands of threads of your parallel experiences that are going into this oversoul. Now, the oversoul, from my understanding, and you guys always take what resonates and let go of what doesn't. Okay, I'm pulling this from my experience in shamanic studies, plant medicine studies, 40 years now of seeing energy like every day, but always take what resonates and let go of what doesn't. So the oversoul is housing data, because that's all of this is just data. This is all we are, is energy, right?
Right.
And that oversoul then transcribes it to Akashics and Akashic records, just like the halls of wisdom that are like beyond comprehension of everything that ever was or will be. So does that kind of break it down and make sense?
So
As
yeah, but why am I just focused in this body right now? Like those other strings of my soul that are in thousands of other lives right now. Why why am I focused?
that's that's the point of being human. We come here to forget our true nature as collective consciousness. We are always bliss. We are always transcended consciousness. That it's the macrocosm experiencing itself in trillions of microcosmic ways. And so if we are always in bliss and we're always kind of all seeing, all knowing, we get bored and we're like, yeah, well, what else can I do? Let's go down here where there's a whole bunch of contrast, right? So people are running around like, oh, darkness, like it's we got to overcome darkness. But this is a dualistic paradigm. We're in the 3D, right? And the whole point of it is to be human. And the point of my experience is just for the experience of our individual perspective. Like, what is Ashley like? What is Sarah like? What do we want to do in this particular life experience that's separate from divinity, all of divinity? Because when we're in unity consciousness, we don't have the contrast, we don't have the darkness, we don't have the terror, we don't have the murder. And so it's just an experience in the human paradigm. So that's the point. The point is to forget. And just remember, we're only here for like, I don't know what, 80 years in all of time, like,
Right.
like infinite time. And so, yeah, and that's why I keep again bringing it back around to like, you guys, let's live, live right now, live
Right.
right. What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
I'm always like, don't take things so seriously. Like you said too, I was listening, I was like so connected with you because I'm always like, gosh, just go on the trip, go, eat that. Like just do it. Follow your joy, like just to have that, the knowing that every single second of your life is a gift, right?
Even though it doesn't always feel like it. Like life is contrast, man, and it doesn't come with a user manual. And regardless of what people are posting, like nobody knows what they're really doing. Like everybody's making it up as they go. And most people are like thirsting for connection and for depth. And so bringing your awareness back to yourself. And this can be a hard life. 3/4 of this life has been really uncomfortable for me, easily,
Hmm.
whether that's physically, whether that's energetically, whether that's psychically. It takes so much for me to maneuver and navigate my system, being an ultra sensitive who's like constantly bombarded by stimulus. There's so much that comes with this, right? And so still to this day, sometimes I'm like, dude, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, right? And so if you're in a space that you don't like, if it's really uncomfortable or really hard, like I get it. And that's part of it. And so how can we be with that discomfort? Can we learn to soften in the discomfort? Is there something that we could learn from it, right? Because way back in the day, I used to blame everybody for like, and I hated everything because because I felt self-righteous and like, well, nobody understands where I come from and all. And that's true. Like, look at where I came from. I had the entire deck stacked against me for
I
real.
know.
But ultimately, like, I figured out that wasn't going to serve me. right? So it's like, yeah, that was some crap, man. But like, again, what can I learn from that? How can I change and grow and find wisdom? And that's the ultimate alchemy. And I really think that that's what we're seeing collectively shift in humanity right now, is the invitation to alchemize a
Mhm.
lot of the unconsciousness and start to kind of like remember, like, oh, wait a second. Oh, that's funny. We just spent the last 2000 years like deeply in, the trenches of like slumber, if you will, forgetting our divinity. And now we're kind of waking more up to that
Right.
energy.
Yeah, I mean, so when I think of what you're doing now and it's you're a healer, psychic surgery, that word would have been like, I mean, no one would be talking about that. Even maybe, 10, 20 years ago, that word would have been like, she does what?
What?
But
Yeah.
now, because we're moving into this um, new energy, how do you describe that? Where we're moving into?
Yeah, collective awakening, if you will. We're just, yeah, it's a higher level of consciousness.
So explain what you do with this psychic surgery.
All right, so now full time, it's still very much like a paramedic, but now I'm pretty much paramedic for the soul, right? And so I do full time medical intuition and psychic surgery. And psychic surgery, in layman's terms, is like being pressure washed and roto-rooted, because people get so stuck and bogged down in their traumas and their addictions and their pharmaceuticals and their McDonald's and their all the stuff, right? And it's like the inertia just like stagnates them. So psychic surgery is just like Western surgery, except obviously not physical. I'm working on the etheric templates and the etheric bodies. But since everything is made up of energy. So energy work is the etiology of all matter. So when we understand how to work with, clear, balance, realign the organ systems, the mental body, the emotional body, the entire auric field, the chakra channels, the meridians, we can really like open up that person's own energetic flow so that they can access vitality. And so, say for instance, somebody was raped a long time ago and now they got fibroids or they keep having miscarriages or whatever. There's all kinds of different presentations. So first thing is I would look at the outer layer of the auric field, and there's going to be, tears and traumas in the field. So we would repair that and then clear out any of the pain, any of the fear, any of the darkness, any of the heaviness from the auric field. And then I would go organ system by organ system until I got to the root. So for somebody like this, it would be cervical, it would be vaginal, in utero, like all of these spin. I would work through the whole pelvis to bring balance to the actual organ systems. And so it looks very much again like Western, but what I'm doing is I'm working with the energetics of things, stabilizing the organ systems and balancing the entire field. So people feel like they lost 1,000 pounds. They feel like they got pulled out of a ditch. They feel like their whole system got overhauled and they can finally like feel like themselves. They're like, oh my God, I feel like myself. I haven't felt like this in decades. It's like, yeah, you just needed that pressure wash. You just needed that roto-root. And yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I've been doing that full time for quite a while now. It's just beautiful to watch people transform.
Can you see the tumor or the cancer when you're doing your roto-rootering?
Yeah, and there's nothing bad or wrong, even like meth, heroin, fentanyl, tumors, cancer, like it's all just what it is. It's a consciousness, right? And so to me, there's the reason that it's there, it's not to be gotten rid of. It's not like, oh, this is bad. It's like, all right, well, what's this about? And if we'll go into a tumor and the tumor has a story to tell, the tumor is an energy and it's
Hmm.
reason. And so if we come in, I can usually tell the aggressiveness of it. And of course, like I'm not opposed to Western medicine. I advocate Western medicine in emergency care and in surgeries that are actually necessary. I'm more in terms of chronic health care. That's going to be more holistic in terms of, and at that time, I like to leave it up to the individuals into what they're comfortable with. So we look at all sides, like these are the Western protocols, these are the holistic protocols, and these are all your choices so that they can feel empowered, right? But everything, even uh, it was math for a long time, but now it's fentanyl. And these things have a consciousness to it. And people are using substances and everybody's doing something. talk to me even if it's scrolling or like just working too much, like everybody's doing something, right?
Right.
And so it's like, what are you up to? What are you getting out of it? What are you trying to avoid? Are you willing to look at it? Right. So we address all of that stuff. If it's just looking at your phone too much, or if it's going all the way down into some hardcore like addiction stuff, it's like, yeah, it's all the same to me, because it's all just energy. And my goal is to be able to show up for the person who's pretty much just like nearly flatlined or in some sort of they've been to every doctor, every specialist, got no answers. They're at the end of their rope, right? Maybe they're having their own spiritual awakening or their gifts are coming online and they're like, what is this? How do I deal with this? And I'm like, welcome to the party. Come over here.
Right.
There's
That's
nothing
happening more and
wrong.
more, right?
There's nothing wrong with you, girl. If somebody would have just said that to me, that would have saved me like 20 years of shadow work, but I understand I had to go through it to be where I am now. So
Do you have to spend more than one session with people usually? Is it a series of
honestly,
roto?
I'm still super like a paramedic. I'm still very one-off unless somebody's very acutely critical, actively suicidal, or there are a few people that are like, I really feel like I need, a couple. But for me, because I maximize, like I'm going to take it all the way there and we're going to completely overhaul the system and give the person a 3 to 6 month curriculum in a single session. And so I like to do one-offs, which is like you never hear that in the spiritual world.
Right.
People trying to do long. That's not never how I've been. But I think I'm just still meant to be the medic who's just, but if people need me, of course I'm here.
You were talking in one about, you know, be clearing your body, getting your psychic abilities, getting your gut biome is like the main center of your body that needs to be clear, right? For you to access I mean, we all have these gifts.
Yes. Yes. To varying degrees, we all have these abilities. And my understanding and my personal lived experience is we have to go down and in to go up and out. We see a lot of ungrounded spiritual psychic people that are kind of blowing around like tumbleweeds, right? It's super common. And there tends to be a disassociation from the practical, right? Almost like I'm not human, I'm too ascended, right thing. But that's a disassociation and a non-acceptance of the present day reality, which is you have a body and we're alive, so we're human. And so the willingness to come down into being human and being like, yes, we are like heightened consciousness and have access to these gifts and abilities. And at the same time, we still got to do laundry and pay bills. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so coming down and in to look at our diet, hydration, sleep cycles, movement, those are going to be the basics, but really being willing to handle our own fears, traumas, shames, darkness. Navigating that helps to open our access to higher frequencies of light. It's always equal and opposite, always in this dimension, always. So if you're willing to burrow down into your stuff, kind of crunchy, kind of not super fun, but you're willing to just alchemize it and own it and be like, okay, yeah, that's there, then we're going to have equal access to the higher plane. And so that's how I've been able to run bigger and bigger and bigger currents of energy. Additionally, physical health, because the body is like the vessel for all of this energy to show up. And the gut biome is like the second brain of the body. It is physical health. Our culture is not taught anything about the gut biome. So think of it like this: in your car, you got to do an oil change every 3 to 5,000 miles or whatever. So, doing a little bit of a cleanse every once in a while, great for that. But think of doing like a full colon hydrotherapy, or you could do just any sort of gut balancing or colon cleanse. You can do a liver gallbladder flush. Do these things supervised, you guys, because if we're not eliminating properly, it's not a fun experience. But clearing out the gut perfuses and opens up the physical energy for the actual body. And you're just going to feel so much better in your body, and then you're going to have access to your gifts even more.
Right. And yoga, meditation. You talk about how much you really connect in yoga.
Yoga,
I mean,
meditation, hydration, sleep, And even if you have a hard time sleeping, just find some sort of, whether it's a binaural audio, maybe you like TM, transcendental meditation. I'm a big Vipassana girl. I've done several. I love those things. It's so hardcore, and I'm kind of a hardcore chick. And so like find something that works for you. Tai Chi, Qigong, right? Where you can connect breath to movement and bring your awareness back to presence. And you practice that, and then drink some water, move your body, breathe, get in the sun. We're like plants with anxiety, right? We need water and sunlight. So just those basics, and we're going to feel night and day better. And then go into face your stuff, like handle your family dynamics, like get a hold of your shame or your ego or your whatever. And ego's not going anywhere. Liz, we're not meant to not have egos. That's another kind of false understanding of the spiritual community. It's really cute. But this is, humans have egos, and it's meant to protect us. There's nothing bad or wrong with the ego. We all know narcissists, though. That's a whole different thing, right?
Right.
So just get a handle on what you're actually up to, stay in your lane, focus on yourself, and do what you need to do for you, and your gifts are going to open up. That's really the point of all of it. But if we're out here like taking everybody else's inventory, or we're bypassing, trying to be uber spiritual, doing like back-to-back ayahuasca ceremonies, or we're just like doing all of these different things and we're not integrating it, then we're still just missing it.
Right. When you were parenting, well, you still are parenting, but when you were raising your children, coming from a mom that way you did, and I'm thinking, I always tried, like when I raising my girls, I'm super intentional. Were you really like intentional and try like in a super high way because of how you were raised?
I certainly tried to be. It was really hard for me because all I knew what was done to me. And all I knew was that I was not going to do that. And so I actually swung a little too far on the pendulum, where I was overly permissive and I didn't set good enough boundaries. But fortunately, my kid's dad was good with boundaries and like follow through. So we balanced out in that way. And my kids turned into really good people. But parenting was like the ultimate growth edge for me, because I had no example,
I
right?
know. I
And
always wondered that. Yeah.
wing it. And I felt like half the time I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like the worst parent in the world. But I was like, I'm not hitting them in the head with a hammer. I'm not burning their eyes out with nail polish remover. I'm good. Like it's better than where I came from, right? Like this is where the buck stops. The buck stops with me. And so I was not perfect by any stretch, but I interrupted that generational, multi-generational trauma cycle. And I'm
Was your
proud of
mom's mom like that?
it. As far as I know, mental illness and addiction
Oh,
go way back in my
okay.
long time.
Interesting.
I hit the genetic lotto. Well, I chose the genetic lotto, I
Yes,
guess.
you did choose. It's so, yeah, when you look at life especially after your book and your life and knowing you and thinking, gosh, she chose that. Like, that's amazing. Like you must, like have you leveled up in this life or something.
Much. And now it makes sense to me, because I understand my dharma is to bridge the mainstream with the energetic and holistic, and help millions of people understand energetics, consciousness, holistic ways that they can actually heal and transform themselves. And so I had to be forged in that hot of a fire for that long to be granted access to this quote power, if you will. Does that make sense? It's
Yes.
very much like an earned thing. And I really do believe that, because there is a lot of responsibility when I'm working with people's innermost, most delicate, darkest dynamics. It takes a tremendous amount of integrity, and I hold that in a really strong container. And I needed all of what I've gone through to get to that place where it's like, yeah, I understand what I'm here to do, and I'm actively doing it. And so, because it's such a big dharma, and it's the affect will ripple out, and it's not like it's all of us doing it together. I just understand that my construct is able to handle really intense frequencies that most people don't. And that's okay that they don't. I'm wired for it. I'm wired for Compton 911. I'm wired for like the super hardcore calls that I'm still running with people. And And it's all part of that. And so I've got the construct to be able to help in the way that I am.
Right. Oh man, I really loved meeting
Heavy
you.
lifting, girl, heavy lifting. And that's why I'm like, all right, I still got to have fun. Like, I still got to just go dance, or I like to travel. I like to just like have, still be human and still like give myself space to just be like, okay, yeah, I'm in the trenches. I've been in the trenches for a long time, and it can get dark and it can get lonely. And so it's like, I'm still human. And I still have a life. So what do I want to do? I want to go cruise around. I'm going to go see my daughter in Bali, like she just go do stuff.
Right. I love it. So on your website, you have where people can book sessions, sarahkgrace.com. And there's a group that people can subscribe to.
That is the Grace Place, and we have the sweetest little community, and it is people from all over the world who are energetically sensitive or working through their traumas, and they're wanting to come together for an actual community. We have classes once a month. I do group healing sessions. So if you don't want a one-on-one or can't afford a one-on-one, this is a totally accessible way to me. It's yeah, it's called the Grace Place, but it's just the sweetest community.
Yeah, but I thought that what a neat thing to have for people, to come together. So, but we're ending now, but when you're looking at me, when you're like around, I know you talked about being at Target and seeing the dead person behind the lady, but are you constantly like trying to, when you're walk in public or you're with someone on Zoom like me, are you constantly being like, oh, her aura is like here and here? Are you
Well, I see it, but I don't pay attention anymore unless I'm on duty or unless I'm in session. So think of it like you go to a Best Buy and you know how you go to the back and there's that whole wall of TV screens.
right?
In the middle, the TV screen I'm looking at currently is you. And there's all of these other TV screens. I'm just not looking at them. Make sense?
Oh,
And just because, yes, the energy is always there, the data is always there. But I learned a long time ago that like I can't turn it off. Some people say they can, good for them. If they can, I can't. It's just too much data. But I can I can attune to it, or I can choose to not pay attention to it. And if I'm not paying attention to it, then it just, but so yeah, I can see you. If people are like, oh, what do you see? That's always the next thing. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go.
oh gosh. I
You're
really,
beautiful. You're beautiful. We have pink and we have gold and we have orange and a big heart. And, oh, you're beautiful.
oh, yeah, there's no secrets, right?
There's no secrets with me. No.
Oh, Sarah, I've really, really, really loved meeting you and reading your book, and just your journey alone you've made an impact in my life for sure. And I know that's what you're here for. And I know you are here to do so many amazing things, and you're on your purpose. You're living your dharma, like you say, and it's just just a beautiful story, and you're a beautiful soul.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You're
As
so welcome.
and I really appreciate you having me here. And I appreciate you having this podcast and putting out consciousness and beauty in your own way. And again, stronger together, sister. Like we're all threads of the tapestry. We all matter, right? And each of us is stronger with the other. So thank you for having me. And I'm happy to continue to support you in your growth and support any of the listeners in their growth. Like you guys, stronger together, for
Yes.
sure.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you.